So our first chapter today was on the labor markets. The labor supply is the number of hours people are willing to work given the wage rate. And they're willing to work more hours if the pay is higher. Right? That's how overtime pay comes into play. In order to get people to work overtime, companies must offer a higher rate. So there's two ways we can split our time between work hours and leisure hours. The opportunity cost of more work hours is whatever your value on your leisure hours that you're giving up. So, the first few hours are not very costly in opportunity cost terms, but as you give up more and more, then your leisure hours are more valuable. Right? So the first hour a week you choose to study for this class instead of spending time with your family is not so costly, but the more you do, the more it is. Now keep in mind, since you're not paid to be a student, technically this class is leisure time for you, not work time. It's work time for me, but doesn't just feel wonderfully leisurely to yourselves. So, there's two effects that happen whenever wages change. First is the substitution effect of higher wages. Now, for both of these, I want you to keep in mind a little example. Suppose that you earn 10 hours a week and you're working for 60 hours. That means you get $600. And you're fine with that for your lifestyle. However, you find out that you get a $15 an hour raise. Now, you could choose to cut back to 40 hours, have the same income, or work more hours and have a higher income. So whether you choose to work more or less than your current working hours depends on these two effects. So first, the substitution effect means that an increased wage encourages people to work more hours, meaning that there's a substitution of labor for leisure. Whereas the income effect of higher wages is where an increased wage rate allows a person to reduce the hours worked without losing income. So at low wages, the substitution effect dominates. However, at high incomes, the income effect dominates. Pardon my bad spelling. So there's a few things that can shift the supply of labor. First, it could be tastes. Now remember, the labor supply are the workers themselves. So it's the taste of the workers for leisure, income, and work. It's also their level of income and wealth. So up in the first one, it is how much they want income, whereas here it's their actual income or wealth level. It's also expectations, such as of a change in income or consumption requirement. So something in your life makes you consume more, perhaps a child, or you expect to have a higher paying job, perhaps after you finish education. There's also prices of consumer goods. Right? If it's going to cost you more to get the goods that you want, then you're going to have to be willing to, or you're going to need more income and therefore have to work more to pay for these goods. There's also taxes. And clearly this would be taxes to workers either on their payroll or on consumption, such as a sales tax. So the elasticity of supply for labor for very low skilled jobs, this elasticity supply is highly elastic. And that's because for low skilled jobs, there's lots of possible people who could work the job. However, so that means that any little change in the wage rate is going to mean a large change in the number of applicants because their applicant pool is much larger. This is something like a fast food cook. Whereas for high skill jobs, the labor supply is highly inelastic because these are high skill jobs. You can't magically enter the workforce being a registered nurse unless you actually have a nursing degree and pass the exam. So because of this, they are very inelastically supplied. It takes time for someone to decide to shift to these jobs. Okay. So that is the supply side, the workers. There's also a demand side to elasticity. Not to elasticity, to labor. So, the quantities of labor that employers are willing and able to hire at given wage rates is derived from the demand for goods and services. So we call labor demand a derived demand. Workers, So the marginal revenue product is the change in total revenue divided by the change in the quantity of labor. Basically, if I were to hire one more worker, how much more revenue will I get? So how much is that worker causing my revenue to go up by? Basically, it's the value of a worker. And since it's how much additional revenue they can bring, it's also the maximum that an employer is willing to pay the employee. And so this marginal revenue product just is the demand for labor. So as an employer hires more workers, the marginal physical product decreases, meaning the amount of additional work this person can do, things they produce, decreases, and so the marginal revenue product decreases. So that means we get downward sloping labor demand. Gonna bring a picture in here. Oops. And this shows us the market for the demand for labor is this downward sloping, and the wage, and then the wage rate is just the amount that they're willing to pay. So if this wage rate were to fall, then that means that there would be an increase in the quantity of labor demanded. If instead we increase productivity, then that would mean an increase in our marginal revenue product, and thus an increase in the demand for labor, and we would see an increase in the number of workers. And that is all for the market. The policies of minimum wage being imposed is in a separate video. I hope this helps.